everybody. I'm Amy. This is my wife, Maggie.
Hello.
And together we are ThinkerThemer, and we're back with another episode of 10, out of 10, the series where we attempt to rate all of our board game collection out of 10 games at a time.
Let's do it.
We are getting through a lot of them now. You know why? Because I have a broken foot.
Yes,
and,
unfortunately.
It's been that way for probably about 3 months now. So we are getting through a lot of games,
Yes.
which is good. Which
You're
is good
stuck
for
at
the
home
series.
and there's nothing else to do but play games. And lucky we have of them to get through.
So many of them. I keep saying to Maggie, everywhere I turn, there's another game in Shrink that I can open and learn.
Like, let's play this today.
Yeah. It's like we've been preparing for this moment.
We have, yeah. Well, there you go. It finally came in handy. Yes.
All right, let's get into it. We'll start with one from your side.
All right, so the first game that we're going to be looking at is a little card game called Odin's Ravens, where you are essentially, it's a two-player game, and you're each playing as one of Odin, the Viking or Norse mythology god. You're a raven of Odin's, and apparently there was one of the stories is that the raven has to like scan the land, and so you're doing the scanning of the land, that once a day thing. But you're racing one another. So you have these all these different cards in the middle that have two sort of sides that represent different terrains, and you're both starting at the same point, and you're kind of racing and crossing each other at the end. But the interesting thing about this is you each have your own deck of terrain cards that are the cards that you're going to need to be able to play to advance your raven. But you also have some lucky cards, because lucky can actually help you modify the terrain along the way by, for example, turning one card upside down, so all of a sudden now the type of terrain is something that you have in your hand, or even swapping cards, or my favorite, which is adding more cards to your opponent's, either side of the terrain. So you kind of want to you kind of want to do that, time that well, because if you do it too soon, you're also going to have to go through that path, because you're essentially both going to be traversing the same path.
You can create a loop, and you want to create that behind you so that you're not having to go through it.
So on any given turn, you're going to be able to draw 3 cards, and you can decide which deck to draw that from, either from your terrain deck, so that it'll give you more options, or from the lucky deck, which will gives you those options to mess around with the terrain. So it feels quite interesting, because you're like, ooh, what should I, should I try and mess up the terrain a little bit more, or do I just need more cards?
Do I just need to race ahead? And so you need to have the right terrain to go forward one step onto that terrain, or you can play any pair of a terrain as a wild so that you can move forward. So you always have a lot of options to you, available to you. But because there's a hand limit, it gets quite interesting deciding which pile to draw from.
I really enjoy also that if you manage to get the same terrain in a row, like multiple cards in a row, then you only need to play one card of that terrain, and then you go, you swoop through all of that. Yeah. So that's pretty satisfying when it happens.
So, I purchased this game a long time ago, a long time ago, when we were doing our top 10 two-player games, and a lot of people said, you should check out Odin's Ravens. And so I purchased it thinking that it was a really heavy game, and so it's just been sitting on the shelf because I'm like, I need a lot of brain space. Turns out it's actually really simple.
Super light.
And it is so beautiful. The cards are so gorgeous, and they're like quite thick. And the ones that you put down for the terrain cards in particular, they're really beautiful.
And even the ravens, the wooden token of the ravens, it's just very simple but really satisfying to play with and look at on the table.
Yeah, it's a really nice little filler. I gave it a 7.3. I think that it's just one that you could grab out and teach, and it's very simple. I likened it a little bit to Hana Mikoji in terms of like the amount of time that it takes and the degree of like when you're deciding what to do. It's kind of got like a nice little decision space, but it doesn't overstay its welcome.
I gave it a 7.6, so actually higher than you. I really I love the aesthetic of it. And it was one of those games that like the first time you play, it's like, oh, this is actually really simple. And then the more you play, you just get into the whole like, come on, because it is a race, and you do feel like it starts out fine, and then it really builds towards the very end. So I quite enjoy that. Yeah, there you go. So that's Odin's Ravens.
Now the next game is a little game out of Korea called Ptolemy, and this game is actually by the same designer as the designer of Jekyll versus Hyde, another two-player game, a game that we really enjoy. Ptolemy is a shedding game, and it's quite interesting and innovative because what you have is you have a shared board that has planets that are going to go onto this board. They start off it, but as someone plays a card, they are going to climb and go around this rondelle I just realized it was a little
yes,
rondel.
that's true.
Anyway, they're going to go onto this circuit and they're going to move around. And the interesting thing is the first player might play, say, the card for Mars, and Mars might move up and then it lands on, say, the number 5. So now it's on 5, and the next player has to play a card using 2 rules. 1, it has to be a different planet card, and 2, it has to land higher on the board than that 5 that the Mars is on, same or higher. And that's quite difficult because there's only numbers up to 7, and once a planet moves up to 7, it then starts to go down in numbers again. And so there's this really interesting tension of which card you play when, because you're trying to ultimately shed every card in your hand. And if you can keep control of the game, and there's a number of ways you can do that. At first, the strategy for this game is not clear. It's quite like, you're like,
or even at
this
last, if you're me.
But it's like, this is unusual. But then I realized that there's a little reference card that tells you the distribution of cards in the deck. There's always some cards left over, so you're not sure exactly what your opponent has. But you do know that if there's a single card that is available and it's in your hand, well, then of course your opponent can't have it. And so you're staring at this board and you're thinking about, what can I move? Which planet can I move to ensure that the other person has no legal move? And that is really the strategy in the game. And I really, once I honed in on that, I really enjoyed it. And it's really quick and easy. You only play the best out of 3, or first person to win 2.
2 rounds, yeah.
2 rounds. And I just found it really interesting. Really simple.
Yeah.
But really innovative and different.
Yeah, I think it's one of those games that I still haven't fully wrapped my head around. It's like I get it, but I don't quite get how to win, or at least how to win against Amy, because we've only played, it's a 2-player game, and like we just kind of keep playing it together. So I really like the because it's got like these wooden tokens with like stickers on top for the planets. I think the planets, some of them are too similar looking, and so I like. It usually takes me like a second to go, wait, which one's the
pink and the red, I think, are a little
See, for
similar.
me, I was going to say the yellow and the orangey one are like a bit too. So yeah, that sort of kind of takes me a little moment sometimes. There's also, did you talk about the eclipse?
No, I
no.
didn't.
So there's also e-cards, which there's one token on the board that starts already on the board called the eclipse. And so you can at any time, if you have an e-card, you can play that e-card, and there's one for every planet. And what that does is it swaps positions of that planet with wherever that eclipse token is. And that can be a good sort of get out of jail free card sometimes when you're like, oh no, if the eclipse is in a good position, then yeah, you can sort of do that. So I enjoy that as a twist on it. But yeah, I often kind of found myself getting stuck and not knowing how to unstuck myself. And just going,
but that's the idea, because I was trying to make you stuck.
That's true.
Yes. Anyway.
So I enjoy my time with it. I really like the aesthetic of it. I love like the illustrations and that sort of thing. What did I give?
It's a little bit weird and I like it. I gave
it very quirky. Yeah.
I gave it a 7.5. I have a mixed relationship with shedding games. Some of them I really like. Some of them I don't like at all. And generally speaking, I prefer trick-taking games. So, games like Scout and all of those kind of shedding games, I find them okay, but sometimes I feel like I feel very stuck with the hand I have when I'm playing those style of games. Whereas this one, I felt like I had a bit more control, but you didn't feel that way. So it's quite interesting.
Which is that where I'm the opposite, where I love like shedding games. So I'm giving this a 7. But yeah, I usually love shedding games. And this one, I felt more stuck than when I done with the other one. So it's obviously some way it works in your brain. But and I wonder if the P is silent. Is it Ptolemy, like psychology?
Yeah, probably.
Or Ptolemy? But then Canar was, who knows? I'm sure people will help us out in the comments. Right,
Please tell us, help.
Ptolemy or Ptolemy?
Named after a famous astrologist.
Yes, because you're technically astrologers, but that doesn't really
that does not shine through at all.
The next game is it's Morels, but we actually picked this up. Did we pick this up in Taiwan? Yeah, and so we actually have the Chinese edition, which it's not really a language dependent type game, so it's not really a huge issue. And the artwork is still gorgeous and the theme is still adorable. So in Morels, you are collecting mushrooms. So you're kind of walking along the forest, collecting different varieties of mushrooms to either cook them and get victory points, and they all have different sort of savory levels. So, some of them are going to be more valuable than others. Or you can sell them for sticks, the best possible currency that you can have. So when you're cooking them, you need at least 3 of the same type of mushroom to cook them, and you also need a pan. So that's a nice little thematic kind of touch. I don't know why you can also collect pans along the way. Like, who is walking around this forest just
leaving
dropping
their
pans along? But so that's how you cook them. Or if you're selling them, you need at least 2 of the same type to sell them for their stick value. Sticks are very handy because on your turn you have this forest, sort of all these different cards, usually 8 cards splayed out, and then you're at the very end, so the sort of the right end, where the first 2 cards are free, so they're at your feet, and so you can collect either of those cards. But if you want to go further along, you're going to need to spend sticks for each extra card that you go along.
It's like you're leaving a trail so you can make your way back.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe that's like the longer stick that you're like using the stick to like drag them closer.
Yeah, a stick would not be a good idea for trail marking. Please don't use that. Like, so which stick was the
Oh, yeah. It feels like on par with the cleverness of the leaving breadcrumbs idea then any animal will eat through. But sticks is probably even worse. Anyway, so you can spend sticks to collect cards that are further down. So other options that you have. So there's also butter or cider. So there's other types of cards that you can get. So cider is, well, I'll start with butter. Butter you can add as you're cooking mushrooms if you're cooking 4 or more mushrooms at the same time, and then that adds additional points. I think it's like 3 points from memory. And cider is the same, but I think it's like 5 or more.
Yep.
And then it adds, I think it's like 5 extra points to each one of those stacks.
Yes.
There's also, and I think it's like Angel of Death mushroom, which is essentially like if you get a kind of toxic mushroom along the way. So what happens is every time a turn takes place, 1 card is going to be going into the decay. And one of the options that you have on your turn is you can actually, instead of picking up a single card from the forest, you can actually pick up the whole of the decay, which is usually going to have between 1 to 4 cards. So that could be a really good way of picking up a lot of cards. Sometimes you might end up with an Angel of Death in there. And what the Angel of Death does is it reduces your hand limit down to 4, which can really severely kind of impair your way along the way.
Because
so
that
whole
is
tension
the
is
whole
in your
tension in
your
this
hand
game.
limit.
Yeah, is that you are trying to do set collection, but you have a maximum number of cards. Now you can get baskets, which are going to increase your hand limit, which are really valuable
only by
in this game.
2. So
yeah,
it's
but
like a
every 2 cards you can hold in your hand
Yeah.
is really important in this game because you're trying to wait for certain mushrooms to come along. This is an interesting game. For me, it was a bit simpler than I expected, and I will say that there's probably a lot of admin because it's just 2 players, and every time someone drafts something, everything gets kind of moved along, and the cards get replaced.
Something gets added to the decay, regardless of whatever it's,
so there's a lot of like turnover of the market, which is good in a 2-player game because you get to get through the deck. But it's a bit annoying to continuously be doing that because if you're fast players and we're quite fast, someone is constantly having to upkeep that. Now, I remember when this was on Kickstarter, and some of you might have this edition that has the tiny little pans and the little physical sticks. Super cute. And now finally I understand how those would work in the game. But for me, this game is a 7. It's just a game that like I'll happily play, but it doesn't really excite me. I've enjoyed my time with it, but probably happy to move it on from my collection.
It's a 7.5 for me. So I actually did enjoy it, but I agree. I thought it would be more complex than what it actually is. So, which is good from an accessibility point because it means that it's not like you can actually introduce this to any non-gamer and they'll be like, I love the theme. Theme
is great.
And even in the rule book, there's a lot of thematic like little flair of like, because of course, like this. So I really kind of enjoy that. But yeah, ultimately it's one that I think the limiting factor is just it's quite light and simple.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Morels.
And now the next game is a much older title. This is Ginkgopolis. Now, I purchased this game at Dice Tower West in the flea market. This game went out of print for a little while. It was really hard to find. And then it came back into print. Everyone was really excited to try this classic game. And I went in not knowing what to expect. I didn't really know anything about the gameplay at all, except for all of this buzz around like it's a classic and everyone wants to get their hands on it. I have really enjoyed our time with this. This game we have played probably more than any other game this year. We have played this so many times at every player count, and it's really fascinating. In this game, you are essentially starting with very little, but you start with an engine, and you start with an engine that is going to give you the resources that you need, the tiles that you need to play down into a central area, as well as victory points. So you have this starting engine, but the way you're going to be building it up is you're going to be contributing to this center space with tiles.
It's like city building.
A city
essentially
building
up. Yeah.
It's just not very
like a
thematic at all.
tree. Like I can't remember the name of the tree. The
ginkgo biloba tree, which apparently the world has ended, and now that is the only tree strong enough to bring.
Well, it's also
things
sort
back
of
to
using
life.
it. Yeah, it's kind of like it's 2212. This the year that this takes place, and it's like you're using it as the inspiration of how to build something. That's sort of where it's not a thematic.
It's not a thematic game at all. But anyway, so back to the game. What you're trying to do is you're basically playing an area control game, and there are tiles in the center in the city, which represent the 3 different main things that you're going to need: resources, tiles, and victory points. And depending on where you place the tiles down, you're going to be able to generate those as well. But sometimes when you build up a level, so you can build tiles on top of tiles, you're also going to be able to keep that card and add it to your engine. And the engine gets triggered when you do one of the 3 main actions in the game. So you're essentially building up a city to build up your engine to generate the things that you need to continue contributing to the city. And at the end of the game, there is an area control game for each of the districts that are eventually created in a city, which is a group of the same color of tile of 2 or more. And if you have your pieces out there, because every time you place a new tile, you have to have the resources, which are essentially your little
tokens of your color.
that are going to go there and show how much influence you have in that area. There's going to be an area majority game, and you're going to score points at the end. It's actually not as difficult as I just made it sound. It's not as difficult as I thought it was going to be, but it does have, it's very abstract. So if anything gets in the way of a teacher this game, it's just the fact that it's quite abstract. But once you get the hang of it, I'm surprised at how mid-weight this game actually is. And it's also just such a random combination of things, because you're also, every time you choose a card to play out of your hand, everybody does that simultaneously, and then you pass the rest of the cards to the person on your left. And why that makes a difference is because there are things that you don't want people to do to your districts in the center, and so you also don't want to give the person to your left a card that would be useful to them and really bad for you. So then you've got the decision of, do I play a card that's really good for me, or do I try and destroy a card or remove a card that's good for my opponent? And so that's really fun. So there's the hand drafting, and then there's the engine building, which is the crux of the game, and then there's the area control and the tile laying. So there's so many mechanics in this game, but for some reason they just combine together into what I think is a very elegant game.
I would agree. I think this is, even though it's not, like, it's very abstract, it's not really a thematic kind of experience, it is a very satisfying, it is clunky as a themer to learn initially, because like nothing really makes any kind of logical sense. It's just like, oh, just because that's just how it works. It's like, okay. But because there's only really like, I think it's like 3 key things that you can do. Once you finally kind of wrap your head around that, it's like, oh, okay, this is good. And I found that the area majority is like a really long play area majority, but along the way there's also so much going on that is quite engaging. There's also going to be cards that give you end game conditions that can even, I don't think we've had a game where the end game conditions has overpowered someone being really, really great at the area majority, but you can almost,
it all helps.
it all kind of helps, because you're getting, so I quite enjoy my time with it, but I think I would hit a point, because I kind of need more theme to keep me.
Well, originally we were thinking of covering this in Agree to Disagree, because from the beginning Maggie really didn't like this game that much, and then I saw how you became better and better at it, and then eventually kept
this is
winning.
Quite satisfying as an engine building. And I don't tend to like area majority, because I don't like that whole kicking out someone and then protecting my turf. But I don't know what it is about this one. I think because there's so much else going on, it sort of it made it feel quite quite satisfying along the way. You're like, ooh, and I'm building this, and ooh, what if I swap this? Because you can change colors of a region and all of a sudden upset a whole thing. So I found this way more engaging.
Directly aggressive.
No.
And actually there's a positive player interaction that when you kick someone off a tile, they get victory points. So
and they get their resources back, which then now all of a sudden, if you're really short for resources, you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess, that's annoying from an area majority, but it gives me like control, like I can actually do other things now. So,
exactly. Yeah. So that was a surprise and delight. I gave it an 8.2. I really like this game. I can see why it's a classic and why people want to get their hands on it. I will be keeping this in our collection, even if Maggie doesn't. I don't know what your score is.
7.8 from me, so that's why we couldn't really do a full agree to disagree, because I'm like, I don't actually disagree with you that much. And we both agree that there's no theme, so we
do agree on that.
We agree that there is actually quite a satisfying engine, and you like it a little bit more than me.
It is quite dry, but I love area control. So anyway, that is Ginkgopolis.
The next game is called Forever Home, and this is a delightful little game about adopting, not just adopting dogs, but placing them in their forever homes, so like the best possible homes for them. Now, the way it actually plays out is every player has their own little grid where you're going to be trying to create different combinations of kind of shapes with different kind of color dogs. So for example, you might have a card. So on your turn, I'll start that over because on your turn, what you can do is you can either collect a token which represents a dog, and they're different kind of colors representing, I guess, kind of like maybe like different breeds potentially. And then you also have the ability to collect cards instead. So the cards are more like the tricks that you're going to be trying to teach these dogs so that they can find a forever home. Because apparently the only way that someone will adopt a dog is if it can do tricks. So you can be like, hey, impressive, no? Take him home.
Yeah. I just imagine a dog on a unicycle, like juggling.
Please adopt me. Yeah. So essentially what you're going to be doing is, as you have these those cards, the trick cards, you're going to be trying to place the dogs that you're collecting along the way in the configuration that card requires. And that card's usually going to be like particular like placements on the grid, and either the same type of dog or two different types of dogs. Once you manage to complete that, the card will tell you, usually some of the cards will have points, so it's like that's just going to be points at the end, but also they'll tell you how many dogs of the dogs that you've just placed in that configuration can now be adopted and placed in different homes. So at the top of the board you have the different kind of like different types of areas. So I think it's like the suburbs, I can't remember what they're different called, but like different types of places that, where the dogs can be adopted. And there's also going to be a kind of like end game goals for each one of those for each one of those areas. So it might be you want to have the most of this type of dog, or you want to have the most variety, or you want to have and that's going to change every single game. So it's one of those games where it's like once you're actually playing it, it's a fairly abstract experience, because you're essentially just collecting these dog tokens to place in different kind of configurations on your board based on the tricks that you're wanting to fulfill, so that then you can move them into their scoring areas. And then there's also going to be points for kind of majorities in different sections for which again can vary in different games.
I found this really interesting. I think my favorite part about this game is the intersection of trying to, as always, achieve multiple objectives in that central puzzle area. So just like Harmonies, just like Calico, you are trying to set yourself up for success to do as many tricks as you can with the configuration, because once you achieve one of those tricks, you're going to be removing some of the dogs, and the way that you choose to remove those could help you achieve subsequent tricks. So that part of it is really quite interesting. The rest of the game around that for me is a little bit light. It didn't quite scratch the itch, so to speak, of of like a crunchier puzzle game. But I like what they did here. This is a follow-up. I think that these designers, it's the follow-up to Dog Park. So they clearly love dogs. And
as do we.
Yeah, and I did find this to be like slightly more challenging than that game from a thinkiness.
Yeah.
So I liked that. I gave it a 7. It's just, to me, it's nice to play. It probably doesn't replace the puzzle games that we have in our collection.
Yeah, I give it a 7.3 because again, I love the theme, I love the concept of it, but it does play a lot more abstractly than what I would kind of like. I feel actually like Dog Park was
Probably
more thematic.
Yeah.
But this is obviously a much more, like, I feel like this is a crunchier and more compact, obviously, experience. So, yeah, that's Forever Home.
Now, the next game is a game that I actually backed on Kickstarter. It's called The Glade, and actually we picked it up at Essen. We just hadn't had a chance to get it onto the table yet. Now, The Glade was a no-brainer back for me because the designer is Richard Breeze, the designer of Keyflower and some of the games in that series. And I really enjoy Keyflower. We haven't had a chance to put it into this series yet, but we will. It's coming. But this is the collector's edition, so what you'll see in photos is the most deluxeified version of this game. The Glade is very different to all of the Key series. It's actually a puzzle-style game, and the way this game plays is that everybody's going to have a little stand that has tiles on it, similar to like a Rummikub style game. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sets, and the sets are based on the attributes that the tiles share. So each tile has a color related to a leaf, it has a critter on it, and it has the food that they eat. And what's really interesting and challenging about this game is that you need to make a set where they share at least one attribute, but then every attribute needs to be different.
Every other attribute, yeah.
Every other attribute. So you could have 3 squirrels, for example, but then if the 2 of them have an acorn and one has a mushroom, that's not a valid set because you need to have all of the same of 1 or 2 attributes and then everything different on the others. So this game is interesting. Once you have the set, you're going to play it down onto the player board in front of you. Now, if you've got a set that has a set of 3, is ideal because a set of 3 is going to allow you to release one of your mushrooms on the Glade board. Now, you take this little toadstool mushroom and you're going to place it on the tile that is missing from your set, i.e. in order to complete this set, you would need to have which tile you place your toadstool on there. Now, as the game continues, if someone happens to draw the missing tile from the bag, on the second part of their turn, they're able to claim that toadstool. So they pass the tile to whoever has that set on their board, and they're going to try to put it, on their board with that set. But then that toadstool becomes theirs and it goes into their storage area. And once it's in their storage area, they can then use it to play in a gap between 4 adjacent tiles on their board to give them a second turn. And actually you can combo that, so you can end up having multiple turns on your turn. But at the end of the game, you're also going to score more points if you're able to trap those toadstools in that way on your board. And the toadstools are going to score in multiple different ways. But essentially in this game, trying to create sets, trying to put them down on your board in a way that allows you to combo and make other sets on your board. And then you're trying to look for those missing pieces in order to gain the toadstool. So the toadstools are moving in this like circuit kind of way, or they're evolving through the game.
Yeah.
I did not like this game. I am just going to straight away say that this game just did not resonate for me. And for a number of reasons. I think the game itself is like the idea of looking for these sets, it's actually quite challenging in and of itself. It is staring at it. I'm probably not great at these when the color is involved. I know that is quite hard for my brain.
The colors are also quite similar. So there is like the leaf to kind of help you differentiate the colors, but they're also just in general, it's like
very similar.
2 shades of brown and 2 shades of green. So it's quite challenging.
So that's the first thing, is you're just staring at these tiles going, this actually hurts my head trying to find a set. So it's not like Rummikub where you have the numbers and you're just like, well, of course those go together and blah, blah, blah. This is like you're staring at it just going, wait, is that a frog and a squirrel? And then because the other attributes need to be different, you think you have a set, then you're like, no, wait.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, once the missing tiles are there, every time you draw a tile, you're having to reference this Glade, which is super complex grid. It's essentially a spreadsheet that's in the center. And you're like, okay, did I just pick up one of these tiles that someone else needs to complete their set? And so you're constantly evaluating what you have. And it's it feels a bit clunky. It feels it's a
very
bit convoluted.
It's a very stunted experience because so there's and I'll agree. Like it was one of those like this just feels almost overly complicated. Where it's like the scenario where I could see this working is like if you have like a few like game designers trying to like break each other, like when going okay, who can like outmaneuver each other in terms of like how like because it just feels like there's layers and layers of puzzle, but it doesn't like at no point did it feel kind of smooth or like intuitive or like or like that's really interesting and elegant in this way. So I think for me, I struggle with that concept of like either all of them have to have one thing in common or two things in common, and then everything else has to be different. It's like, but why? And then that. So,
but then it's like, and then you got to work out what's missing. Then you got to place that on the board. Then you got to draw tiles, and then you need to check.
When you're figuring out what's missing, it's even recommended that like everyone around the table helps to figure out what's missing because it's that level of complicated. And so then it adds a lot of pause to the game that is not pause because you're really thinking. It's because you're kind of finding the thing that you're needing to like. What does this? And then even when as Amy was saying, when it's your turn, you're like, oh, do I have anything that is missing on like that is in that central area that now matches? It completes someone else's or even one of my own four tile sets. Is like that takes so long because it's like it's quite hard to figure out.
So and so as the more we played it, the faster that all of that got, of course, because your brain starts to recognize the patterns as you get into it. But my issue with this game is I couldn't see who I would get it to the table with. It didn't feel like it had an occasion for me. I couldn't imagine, and we play with a broad range of gamers. I couldn't imagine who I would want to get this to the table with and teach because the agony of the learning curve doesn't really support the funness of the game once you get it. So there's not enough payoff for that learning curve. And there's a basic version, and that's the basic version, and then there's a more advanced game, and even the basic version, we were just like, this is just too heavy for the style of game it is. Plus, the theme doesn't really add anything. I love the theme. I love the pieces. I love the characters and things, but it's not helping you learn the game. In fact, it adds a level of obscurity that wouldn't be there if it was just really different colors and numbers. Then it would just, it wouldn't have that same issue. So people have likened it to Quirkle Plus Plus, which is a game that we've actually never played, even though it's one of those very everywhere kind of style games. So unfortunately, this game is not one we'll keep in our collection. I gave it, in hindsight, I gave it a 5.8. I just can't imagine wanting to teach this to anyone. And I honestly, for newer gamers, I wouldn't want this to be their experience of board gaming.
So I gave it a 6. So again, I feel like the people that would resonate with this is people who really love completely abstract stuff, but that are like layered. So it's like, this is like 4 or 5 layers of really like complex abstract.
It reminds me of a game you might have if you have Scrabble, because people who love Scrabble will play it over and over, and it's kind of like that.
But Scrabble is very accessible though. Like you can teach it to anyone and be like, oh yeah, people can understand the concept.
If you were just like playing this and you played it over and over and over and over and over again, you might get better at it, and then it might become smoother. But it's just, I don't think anyone will spend that amount of time playing.
I feel like some people might, but
some people might,
but not these people.
Anyway, we said enough. That was not a game for us. That
was one for us. That was the Glade. All right, the next game is called Orion Duel. So this has got the I don't know if this is like a particularly deluxe edition. It might be because it's got like these like really beautiful, really beautiful kind of wooden tokens. It's a very abstract game where you're essentially just trying to cross the galaxy. So it's a 2-player only game. So you're head to head, but there's multiple ways of winning. So you both have the same sets of tiles that are, it's like kind of like hexes put together in different configurations. So you have the same sets, but the difference between your tiles is your own tiles have more of your color in it. And so, but also usually a little bit of the opponent's color.
One piece of the opponent's color, which is key to this game.
So you're actually going to be trying to either connect one end of the galaxy, so you have the central board with all these different hexes, one end to the other end, from creating a path of your color, keeping in mind that you're also, every time you put a path of your color with your tiles, you're also giving a little bit of a path of the other, of the opponent's color. So that's one way of winning, is connecting two ends. The other one is there's all these galaxy tokens spread out across the map. If you manage to connect, to sort of step on top of 4 of those galaxy tokens with a connected path of your color, you can also win. Or if you manage to connect, this is the evil part, there's black holes, 3 black holes using your opponent's color, so with their connected color, you also would win. So it creates this really interesting little puzzle where you're like, ooh, as you're connecting things, going, do I throw you under the bus, or do I try and like focus on my galaxies, or oh no, I sort of didn't see that you were kind of connecting this end over here.
That's what Maggie does.
Like,
she sneaks around the outside and connects 2 sides of the board when I'm very focused
sort of like,
on other things. So there's a few win conditions you need to keep your eye on. I really like the ability. I really like that every tile that you place has implications for your for your opponent, because it has like their color on it, and so that enables them to then place tiles spanning from that color as well of their own. So it's a really interesting game. I don't think there is a deluxe and non-deluxe. I think
the only
this
version.
is it, and it comes with a beautiful play mat. It comes with a play mat, these beautiful wooden tokens, and then all of the tiles that you're placing are very nice and thick and everything. So it's a real delight in terms of its production value. It's a little bit awkward, let's be honest, in its box size.
Right.
Yeah,
like the size of the box is not square enough to fit with all the others. It's like, it's thin, but it's just so long. And it's like,
And for a game that takes about 10 minutes to play, it's like, I don't know if the size of it, is worth keeping when it's such a, it's just like a filler. It's essentially a filler. Yeah. What did I give it? I gave it a 7.2. I like abstract game. Is that what you gave it?
That's what I gave it.
Oh, there you
7.2
go.
as well.
Which is weird because it's quite abstract.
It is quite abstract, but it's like, I really like the prettiness of it, and I tend to be really good at it.
You are very...
I often win, so I'm like, I like this abstract.
Maggie approves. So that is Orion Duel.
Orion Duel.
The next game is a game called Squadro, which is from the same series of the publisher that we cannot pronounce.
Gigamic.
Please, someone help us in the comments.
Yeah.
Anyway, the same series that brought the wonderful Quarto that I love and Maggie loves to hate.
Yeah, and Koali that
I
quite like.
That I don't like as much. So this is the next abstract in that series, Quadro. Now, Quadro, well, it's not
Squadro.
Next.
Like the S is not.
I know. I always call it Quadro. I think it's because they always begin with a Q.
Squadro. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah, they've broken the Squadro. Anyway, Squadro, you have 5 pieces that start on one side of the board. The objective of the game is to get 4 of those pieces to go all the way across the board and come back. And both of you are trying to achieve that, and you're going across each other.
They look like ships sailing.
They do.
I like that.
And so the interesting part is that each of those pieces can move at a different speed, which is shown to you on the side of the board with the dots that are next to the piece. So one of your pieces might only be able to move 1 step at a time, and that's your whole turn, just moving that 1 step. Another piece might be able to move 3 steps. Now, the interesting part of this game is that if you jump over your opponent, you always land, or if you land on top of them or over them, you always land on the space that's after them. But when you do that, so even if you've still got points of movement left, you stop there. But if you do that, the person that you've jumped, your opponent, has to go back to the start, depending on which side they're coming from. So they have to go back to the start, and they essentially have to reset that piece a little bit. So the objective is to work out what's safe for you to move to get to the other side and come back. But also, you end up in these standoff positions where you don't want to move, because it's like chess, where I'm going to have to sacrifice a piece at some point because there's a standoff where if I move that, you're going to take this, and then I'm going to take that, and then you're going to take that. And, you end up all back at the start again. I took this to work, actually. And what was interesting is it's so quick to teach that I had it set up in a meeting room. And any time I had a meeting in that room, I taught the person who I was having a meeting with the game. I didn't play it with them, but I was like, here's how
That's like a really productive way at work.
I took 2 minutes at the start for them to learn it. And then whenever they had a break, they could play it with someone else at the company. So lots of people got to play this.
Nice.
I played it with a couple of colleagues, and I had many of these moments where I was just sitting there, and like there was just this standoff, and then I felt like I was completely restricted. I couldn't move, and then I lost really badly. But it's just a really interesting game. If you like chess, It's that style of thinking. So
Yeah.
you are thinking about, if I move that, then this happens, or checkers or something like that, where you're trying to play out what happens.
Yeah.
But it's way
and
simpler.
It's perfect information because you know exactly what moves any one of those pieces could make at any point on the board. So
Yes.
yeah. What did you give it?
Oh, good question. What did I give Squadro with an S? I gave it 6.8.
Oh
It's,
my God.
Did you give it higher?
I gave it a 6.8 as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there you go.
So this is the one where we met exactly in the
We
middle.
did. Look, do I need to keep this game? No. To me, it's a coffee table game. That's probably the best way to explain it. I would never be like, hey, I'm going to grab a Squadro and let's have a game. I'd rather pull Divan or one of the many other abstracts that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
This one is just one that if it's sitting on the table, people are going to play it because it's super easy.
I feel like it's a beautiful table presence.
It is.
Like it's because all those wooden pieces are really lovely. Again, it's very easy to teach. The opposite of the Glade, where it's like what is happening? But yeah, quite kind of strategic. I'm surprised that it's not higher for you because it is obviously very, very abstract, and that's what brings it down for me.
Yeah.
And it's also very strategic in that sense of like, ooh, like a gotcha, or like, which I don't enjoy. But I'm surprised.
Just doesn't have staying power for me.
Yeah, there you go.
It's not one that I'm excited to play. I'll play it, but it's not like super exciting.
There
it's
you
just
go.
like, maybe I'm also not that good at it.
So that's Squadro.
Okay, and the next game is
over
your
here.
side,
So
this is a big one.
This is a big one. So this is the 7th Citadel, which we just recently, was recently received. This is
recently received, but backed a long time ago.
Long time
a long
coming.
time ago.
So I haven't played the 7th Continent, which was the kind of predecessor of it, so I can't make any comparisons. Don't ask me how does it compare. I have no idea. All I can tell you is about the 7th Citadel. So it's a it's sort of a either co-op or solo. So in my case, I sort of played it solo.
I
Narrative.
did play it. I did play it for a little bit.
You humored it a little bit, yeah. So I did get to experience a little bit of the co-op element. But largely it was a solo experience. Now, it's a narrative game where you take on the role of a particular character, and that character will have their own deck. Now, it's taking place in this sort of post-apocalyptic world where you are slave gardeners of these, but it's not just like, oh, you're getting tomatoes and pumpkins. Like, no, there's like these sort of weird kind of worm type creatures, and so there's a kind of an element of fantasy as well, kind of swirled through it. And so it's a very harsh environment that you're having to sort of explore and kind of get through challenges with, or try and thrive somehow in. So the way it works is you've got your character that has usually a particular kind of ability. They also have their own deck, and their deck of cards will also be representing it's kind of like your health as well. So it's both going to be the things that you're drawing every time that you're doing challenges. You can, as the game progresses, you can develop that deck, so you can actually get better skills, more powerful skills. They are asymmetric as well, so they have different abilities in the way that they can sort of do different things. But throughout the game, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be exploring the map, which is also using a card system. So you're going to be revealing cards that are going to be then essentially creating the map on the table. And in those spaces, there's going to be different things that you could engage with. So different challenges or things that you could observe, and often consequences. So when you engage with those things, something bad could happen, or there can just be a challenge where you might need to try and open this door, and so you need this particular skill or that particular skill. So the way that the challenges work is that you usually have a minimum number of cards from your deck that you're going to need to draw, but you can go above that usually, and then you have a particular number of stars that you need to be able to meet to sort of pass that challenge. Interestingly, there are the way the cards work is that they have this sort of section where this panel, which is where the stars are. And some of them have full stars, some of them have half a star. And so you can usually put cards together to make two halves form a full star. And all of a sudden, like, great, now I have, I've got 3 points, which is exactly what I needed to pass this particular challenge. There are going to be some challenges, though, that force you to have that certain number of stars with only using, like, say, for example, you need 4 points, but only 3 cards can be used. So you're like, ooh, okay. So even if I go, go super abundant and draw a lot of cards, which you also don't want to do, because remember, that is sort of representing kind of like your health or your stamina throughout. Then you might be like, even if I drew a whole bunch of cards and I wasn't able to get the right number of stars with just the limited in the limited set of cards, then I would be failing that. And so usually there's going to be a negative consequence and things like that. So I think for me, as you're exploring, there's an encounter that kind of happens of like, because it's like what's in this new area, and then the map gets revealed. There's also this element of sometimes there's hidden clues. So they give you a magnifying glass as well, because in some of the cards there's sort of hidden clues of things, and sometimes it might be a hidden number or thing that you might be like, ooh, and then that would prompt you to get another card. So this game overall, I'd say it's an interesting experience. I feel like I love usually a post-apocalyptic settings.
You do?
With this one, I don't know why I didn't connect with it as much. I think partly because it's quite a punishing world. So it's constantly kind of pushing back on you, and you kind of get penalized sometimes for exploring and sometimes for like trying to be curious, which makes thematic sense. But I think I enjoy games where I get to just like discover more.
More exploration, less fighting.
Yeah, and then sometimes if you're having to kind of reset, so they have different scenario booklets. So there's an introductory one, and then once you kind of do that introductory one that kind of teaches you how the game sort of plays, then there's the booklets that are the full, like the campaigns essentially. Then I didn't really like the whole having to reset. Like if you kind of
no fail forward.
No, I really enjoy a fail forward.
Yeah, you have to reset.
So I found that with the writing, I didn't really connect as much with the writing. Again, this is entirely personal preference, and the system. I really do like that system of you're drawing these cards and you're doing the stars. But it just started feeling very repetitive, because like every time a new thing would happen, it's like, resolve, what's this challenge, and so it started getting a little bit repetitive.
Yeah. So I played the introductory, just before you give your rating. I played the introductory scenario with Maggie, and so it was good because I've never played a game that has that same card system, and I quite enjoyed that in and of itself. I really like when something gets revealed, like a new part of the map gets revealed and you don't know what it's going to be. I love that element of surprise, so that really works for me. I really disliked the writing in this game. I found it was just like a little overwritten. There was like a lot of terms and words that were like from the introductory scenario. It was quite. It was like a little too much for me.
Well, there's also like a lot of fantasy terms in terms of like made up names for things and stuff.
Yeah, but I've played other fantasy games.
True.
I found like this was probably lower in my rankings in terms of writing style. I just didn't enjoy it. So that made it really hard for me to like get into the game. And then the mechanics of the cards and the deck, I found interesting, but then it comes down to a style thing. And so then I opted out and I won't rate the game because it's just not at all my style of game. So, but Maggie continued to play it solo. So
I did continue to play it. So I would give this a 7.5, because again, I think it's a solid game, but it's like it kind of has to find its match. And I wasn't really the best match for it, I think, because some people really love the artwork. I didn't connect with the artwork. Either with this and that, so I didn't connect with the artwork, I didn't connect with the story, and even though the mechanics of what you're doing I find interesting, it did become a bit repetitive for me, because I'm like, oh, okay, it's another challenge. Oh, okay, it's another challenge. So
that's higher than I expected, though.
Yeah, because again, it's like I wish I liked it more, because the actual mechanics of what you're doing I do enjoy. So it's just like, for some reason, I just didn't really connect with the narrative and the story of it. But so that's the 7th Citadel.
Now, the last game that we have for this list is Kinghill, which is a game that was originally on Kickstarter, and that's how it came onto my radar originally. But we picked it up, I think, at a Gen Con a little while ago. But the reason why I was so interested in this game is that it's a 2-player only game that centers around worker placement. Now, that's kind of unusual. Most worker placement games are meant for more players because of the tension of fighting over spots. But so that's what got it onto my radar. But now that we've played it, actually what this game is more about is a PvP battle. So each player is going to have a player board that represents their castle that you're going to be trying to defend. And you're going to be essentially recruiting units or heroes that kind of sit in front of your castle walls that are going to be used to attack the other player or defend your castle wall. And what you're ultimately trying to do is you're trying to get their castle wall defense down as far as possible. If you get it all the way down to 0, you win the game.
your
game.
opponent, essentially,
Yeah.
bringing down their
Yeah.
castle offense. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're trying to bring down their castle. The worker placement spots are really the places that you're going to be able to go to collect different resources in the game that you're going to need to build buildings, which will give you different effects, and these units. And also, there's a magic overlay to this, so you're going to be able to get spells, and then you're going to be able to use spells that give you these one-off kind of abilities that are really interesting, that are either used during battle or through different parts of your turn in order to get things done. And then you also have this meter of, I can't remember what it's called thematically.
There was like the energy, it's like, what is it, the stone? Some kind of like magic. Moonstone.
So there's this moonstone energy track, and you're building up, and as soon as you have 5, you can trade those for this really powerful card that you get to use. But what's interesting is there's also this event system in the game, and the more people use the more both players use moonstones, the more of these events are coming into this event system, and once they get flipped, they bring in a game-breaking rule, something that applies to both players that from now on you're going to have to abide by. So that's really interesting. Then as the rounds of the game attract as well, you're turning over these action tiles that give you, generally speaking, a new worker placement spot. So there's tons going on in this game, but ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to defend yourself and you're trying to attack the other player. And that kind of isn't a style of game that we normally play.
No. Yeah.
And I enjoyed it much more than Maggie, and that is an understatement. This is probably a game that could go and agree to disagree.
Yeah, this probably could have gone into agree to disagree. And again, it's like, because I can see how if you like that PvP and like that whole, like people that love Magic the Gathering, for example, you're trying to kind of figure out, it's like, oh, I've got this particular unique power and I've got this unique ability and I can attack this vulnerability here and I can do this. It's like, you would love this because it's got this, and it's got this also this thing of like you have very limited workers that you're using and you're upgrading them, or you're kind of getting them to change professions, and there's some worker placement spots that only some workers can go to. And so there's kind of quite a lot, but ultimately the whole purpose of this is so that you can attack the other person to get them to 0. And I deeply dislike that. Like, I just don't connect with that.
But,
and again, it's a very much
interestingly, I don't like those card battle games. I actually found the battle system in this very simple. Like, you're just looking at the total power and there's like a couple of steps involved, but it's not like, oh, this card, and it's not the card reading in it is actually the actions that the characters give you is not too convoluted. It's like pretty simple, actually. And then on top of that, the way that you upgrade your workers and the things that they can do, I found quite interesting. And this game is really all about like the efficiency at which you decide to upgrade workers versus go out and get things. So there's a lot of decisions that you're making there. But also it's about I forgot the other thing that I was going to say. It's about it's about efficiency and turn order, because turn order. The more you play this game, the more you realize you need to attack when the player is down. Of course, when they don't have a lot of units. Yeah, exactly. And so turn order is really important, but it doesn't naturally change. You need to go and get it, and we weren't doing enough of that. And you certainly weren't doing enough of that when you needed
attack.
it.
And the whole point is attacking. So I'm like, and then like Amy would attack. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm dead. Okay, stop playing this. Yay! And they was like, no, again, I'm like, okay. But then, like,
yeah, she was not enjoying herself. And so,
but I did it for the sake of the exploration and the getting to know what this experience is like. And I can see, like, this is a game that people that like this sort of game would really well, obviously. But it's just
the thing that let it down for me actually is the rule book. I didn't think I didn't like the font choice. I didn't love the rule book, but I gave it a 7.9. I actually really enjoyed it, but if there was someone around that wanted to play it more, I'd probably get more into it. And it definitely, I think it would be more interesting when you weren't playing against a pacifist who didn't want to attack you. I was forcing Maggie to attack me so that I could explore how everything works in the game.
It's a 6.7 for me, so it's not gonna be May that plays with you this game going forward.
Anyway, that is Kinghill, and that's another 10 games covered out of our collection. If you did enjoy this video and you like this series, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we will be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.